Good morning, everyone. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation and the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to the elders, both past and present. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands of which you all work today and pay respects to the elders past and present, and emerging it and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people joining us today. My name is Alexander Nomofsky, and on behalf of Accolade and Public Spectrum, I'd like to welcome you to the Corporate Comms Leader Summit 2021. I'd also like to extend a big thank you to our wonderful speakers and chair who have given up their time to share their knowledge and expertise with us over the next 2 days. Before we start, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping rules. If you have any questions, please use the chat function located at the right-hand side of your screen during each session. Your question would be passed on to the chair, who will direct that question to the speaker or panel. If you experience any technical issues or have any general questions about the event, please use the live support button located at the top right-hand corner of your on-air portal, and myself or the team will get back to you. If you need to leave the conference or accidentally close the screen, just use the same link to get back onto the platform. With that, I'd like to introduce our chair for today and tomorrow. They are Christy and Zora Artis from the International Association of Business Communicators, APAC. For today, Christy will be chairing the event, and she is the IABC Asia Pacific region immediate and past president of the IABC Malaysian chapter. In the business world, Christy is the technical director of themalaysian.com, a cloud application development agency. She advises corporations on how technology can empower their teams in achieving business goals and outcomes. She works with departments heads to design and implement cost-effective ways of automating, streamlining their internal processes so they could focus less on the tech and more on their organization objectives. Christy is also an international speaker on artificial intelligence, automation, and digital engagement. She most recently spoke to 500 people at the Staff-Based Voices Conference and the IABC 20 World Conference, where her session was listed in their top 6 conference highlights. Without further ado, I'm handing it over to you, Christy.
Thank you so much, Alex. I hope I'm loud and clear. But hi, good morning, everyone. It's lovely to have you all here at this amazing event. I know that Alex and Emily have been working hard to put this together for you, and I'm looking forward to being here and being your host for today. So in regards to just this opening speech, we know that the events of the past 12 months don't need any recap. We've had a rather tumultuous year. It's been filled with extreme challenges. It's been hardship and difficulties for so many people across the globe. And I myself am based in Malaysia, and even as my state right now eases out of lockdown, we hold our breaths really and hope that the worst is over, really. But even at a time when all of this was happening throughout the globe, we did see professional communicators just rise to the challenge. And I'm not sure how many of you have seen the Gallagher State of the Sector report that was released maybe 1 or 2 days ago, but they highlighted that communicators had become master adapters. They've been pivoting their skills. They've been working to shift in priority and just aiming to make sure we deliver messages of clarity, of hope, and of togetherness. This really came with so many challenges because, as you've no doubt experienced yourself, we have faced the difficulties of really just cutting through the noise and getting the right messages out there whilst driving stakeholder engagement and also enhancing brand reputation. So leaving aside that it's complicated by an oversaturated digital space, there was the additional complications and nuances that the pandemic just highlighted and in some ways exacerbated. The 2021 Edelman Trust Barometer report saw how government lost massively in terms of trust, and business became one of the only trusted institutions. And part of this is in no doubt because of the tireless efforts of the communicators in organizations and companies around the world, all who have been working hard to prioritize people. And we've seen this time and time again, that in 2020, organizations who prioritize people and that with a stronger focus on well-being, on mental health, and just adapting towards flexible working and improved crisis communication protocols did a little better than a lot. in my opinion, it would do well for us to keep these priorities in mind, even as we continue to work towards building trust, engaging stakeholders, and really just making sure that we continue to prioritize people as we go forward. Now, as part of these efforts, coming together at a summit like this is really an opportunity for us to gain insight and real-world best practices from our colleagues across industries, across Australia, across the Asia Pacific, and I've no doubt, I'm sure that we're probably seeing attendees from across time zones today, including outside of the region. And the thing about associations and events, and even like IABC, is that it gives us the opportunity to really connect with people on a day-to-day basis, even as we embrace the new working from home and working now to build relationships. And that's one of the things that we're going to be seeing in the event today. It's that we are going to cover everything from people's responses to communications, how it's changed as a result of the pandemic, but also how we can build successfully external relationships and to do it remotely. Now, I have to mention this, I'm a volunteer with IABC. We do have a March member month that's coming up. It's 25% discount on small group memberships. So if you're interested, do check out iabcapac.com for more information on the benefits. But really, today is about connection. And I'm really pleased, even as we enter and start the session now, to present our first session with Nicole McKechnie, who's the Director of Communications for Telstra. Now, Nicole, I truly hope I have not mangled your last name, but Nicole is an executive with global experience in corporate affairs roles in both the corporate and the public sector. And she spent the last 9 years at Telstra, where she's currently head of communications. Her previous 2 roles include a stint as chief of staff to Eddie Penn and director of external and corporate in the comms team. She's been responsible for helping shape Telstra's reputation, managing external and internal communications, as well as social media. She currently works at Victoria Police. She previously worked at Victoria Police, where she spent more than 5 years as director of media and corporate communications. During her time there, she was even commended for her leadership role in crisis management, particularly during the very tragic Black Saturday, February 2008 Victorian bushfires. She has spent her early career as part of working as journalist, even worked as a senior media advisor in the national political environment, both here in Australia and UK. I can't say here because technically I'm in Malaysia, but still, it's part of Australia and UK. She has also worked with the Mobile Operators Association on a highly contentious UK mobile phone tower deployment. So in terms of controversial issues, she's been there, done that, seen so many things, from the Victoria Police crises to asbestos in telecommunication networks, cybersecurity breaches, and even most recently, a mobile network issue. So she's highly respected by media despite all of these crises, and has strong media relationships across the country, which I'm sure means we're going to have a lot to learn from her today. Please do welcome her to the stage. And if you have any questions throughout the session, do pop it into the chat, because we'll get to it towards the end of the session. And I'm looking forward to seeing what those questions are. But Nicole, the stage is yours.
Thanks so much, Christy, and nice to meet you over Zoom. So, and thanks everyone for coming along today. It's sad that we couldn't see each other in person, but what a year it's been. And so I've been asked to talk to you about data-informed comms, and don't worry, I have tried to make it as interesting as possible, because as comms professionals, I think data is often something that we don't tend to spend as much or enough time on. And the critical part of that for me is very much around making sure that we're actually spending time on the data that matters. And with the amount of data that's available these days, you know, in all of the channels and in everything we do, I think part of the trick is understanding what data we should use and how to be most effective comms team by leveraging that data. So I might just flick onto the next page, and I do have somebody helping me with the presentation here today because we don't use Zoom at Telstra, we use Teams, so I wasn't able to project. So just bear with me as I I think it's Emily in the background helping me out here. So I just thought I'd start by providing you with a quick overview of our campaign, and it does, sorry, of our strategy. It is deliberately coloured out a little bit there, just simply because obviously there's some commercial in confidence information. So just being a little cautious, as you can understand. But I thought it was an important starting point just to show you how we think about data at Telstra. So our plan obviously has a very strong focus on building reputation, and that sits across all of the pillars. And we track our reputation using 2 data points. The first one is that we use a company called Lewis that tracks our publicity perception, which is something that as a comms team we can absolutely directly influence. We also use RepTrack, which measures reputation. Is a very robust measure. We've just started using RepTrack, and really incredibly interesting in terms of looking at the drivers of reputation, and gets into quite a lot of detail, some of which as a comms team you can impact. But the thing that's really important about RepTrack is that it's critical that you get buy-in from right across the organisation, because in a sense everything that we do as an organisation feeds into that measure. So still doing some work there, and happy to talk about it if anyone wants to as we go. The second pillar there is our T22 strategy, which we launched back in 2018, and we have a comms plan that sits alongside of that. As you'd expect, we measure that mainly through our experience pulse, but it also leads through to our external measures as well. Our experience pulse is an internal measure where we look at how get the temperature of the organisation. I said 6 monthly there because that was actually probably a few months ago. It's turned into a quarterly pulse check now right across the organisation, so we can get a sense of how our people are feeling. The next part of the strategy is PR and customer experience, and so we spend a lot of time making sure that we're absolutely aligned with the commercial priorities of the organisation. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment, because part of what you'll see today is that from a comms function perspective, it's becoming more and more important to show how you can add to the commercial outcomes of the organisation from a PR perspective. So we do measure that quite extensively. Employee sentiment is another pillar of our strategy, and you would expect that that lines very closely with our experience pulse I was talking about a moment ago. And then finally, to create a high-performing team, and we have, as part of the overall pulse, the organisation deep dives into each part of the organisation, so I get to see how my people are feeling. So if we just move on to the next page, I just wanted to cover, I think, a few things today, and you know, on the right hand side you'll just sort of see a very quick visual of data and why we believe that it's critical. It obviously gives us the analytics that I've talked about. It links very, very directly into strategy. It's important when we're creating our creative, and you know, from a comms professional's perspective, I don't know that we've been as strong in testing our creatives often before we go out into and launch PR campaigns, and that's something that we're trying to do more of. It's very much been a marketing domain in the past, but I think they're trying to test how things will land, which is incredibly important. Important in terms of creating messaging and understanding how that's going to be perceived. It's also important for our execution, and then we spend a lot of time really digging into and understanding and reporting on campaigns and how successful they've been. For me, on the left-hand side, just a couple of key points. You know, for us, data-led campaigns have become a habit. We're working on it. We've got more work to do, but it's become incredibly important. And we need to understand all of the data, which is incredibly important. Also, what we want to achieve, ensure that the deliverables are identified up front, and we do work a lot on alignment up front and making sure we're all clear on what the outcome is. But importantly, the last point is one size does not certainly fit all. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that as I go through the presentation. So if we just pop into the next slide, I wanted to just talk to you today about a case study which you may or may not have read about, but are very happy to share and again talk about that as we go through. So as you may be aware, telcos right across the world are rolling out 5G, which is the next generation of mobile phone technology. The thing about 5G is it provides greater data. You'll have heard it talked about with things like connected cars and connected everything, in a sense, as we move into this future world of everything online and everything connected. And 5G provides that capacity to allow everyone to connect more and things to connect more. It's probably a very sort of basic way to describe it. But what has happened, I think, probably over the last 12 to 18 months, but probably 12 months in particular, is that the anti-5G sentiment, which has very much been driven by Facebook groups, has certainly escalated. And you would have heard a little bit on the weekend when they were talking about the changes that were happening with Facebook and removing news, and some of the concerns that people with more extreme views would get more of a voice. So it's a really interesting dynamic, and I'm sure something that a lot of you are looking at with interest at the moment. But we were starting to see an anti-5G sentiment increasing on Facebook. So that was the data that we were having a look at. We had spent the years taking a very sort of traditional approach to the way that we talked about what's known as EME. So essentially the health issues associated with mobile phones and mobile base stations. And by that I mean we would just provide very straight, proactive, transparent information that was led by science, and that had always been our approach. But as I said, we started to see some of that sentiment coming through, and then COVID provided a new opportunity for those groups to really sort of prey on that community anxiety and spread more conspiracy theories around 5G and whether it caused COVID. And you might have seen some of that happen during last year. In some countries, and thankfully we didn't get a lot of this, we got it from time to time, there was vandalism of 5G base stations and quite sort of concerted campaigns by activists particularly in European countries. And what we started to see was that both social and Google Trends showed that there was a steady increase in the spread of this misinformation, and there was also a growing appetite for it. And then there was probably the last piece of research, and we do our own research as well, but we saw some external research that basically said that 1 in 8 Australians had concerns about the health implications of 5G. And so we felt as though there was, there's always going to be the activists that are very hard to shift in terms of their perceptions, but there was certainly a group of people, a cohort in the community that we felt that we could find a way to connect with on 5G. But we really felt that our traditional approach wouldn't compete with the spread of misinformation. And there's 3 reasons there in the middle that I'm talking through. Most people don't pay attention to the science. That's probably number 1. It can get very tough to get through and hard to communicate, difficult to understand. And then it doesn't actually travel on social media at the speed of conspiracy theories, surprisingly. So we decided that we needed to defend ourselves in a different way and really, as we've said there, take it to social media in more of a street fight with, and we had been doing that with our hands tied behind our back, but we needed to have a very different approach that would allow us to slow the spread of the misinformation. So what we did was that we did some research and looked at the research and discovered that satire and comedy was effective in challenging beliefs about science, specifically, those climate change skeptics. And we started with a small test, and we created one of our top posts ever, which you'll see down there on the right-hand side. And basically, somebody said in the text, take down 5G towers, and hopefully you can see all of that. There's they're weapons that cause COVID, and they were saying it in a sort of humorous way. So we decided to retweet that. And as you can see there at the top, attention everyone, this isn't real, but we wish it was, so we're tweeting it now. And we had an enormous response and positive response to that tweet, which gave us confidence that we were heading in the right direction with more of a more of a lighter perspective on something that was a very serious subject. Now, there's obviously absolutely risks, and we're in that, and we were never going to, keep all parts of the community happy with the campaign we decided to take. But we were specifically targeting a cohort that we thought would react in the right way. So I'm just going to move us into the video now, just to spend a couple of minutes showing you what we created.
5G is spreading coronavirus is a theory you might have heard on the dark web, or as it's currently called, Facebook. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, annoyingly. So, firstly, radio waves cannot spread viruses. If they could, someone would have weaponized Smooth FM years ago. Furthermore, from an electromagnetic energy perspective, my favorite perspective, 5G is in the same range as 3G and 4G. Just ask Telstra's 5G EME expert Mike Wood, who's studied electromagnetic energy for his entire professional life.
That's right, Mark. Viruses cannot travel on radio waves or mobile networks. 5G and other telecommunication radio frequencies do not affect the immune system.
Wow. Anyway, if COVID-19 was spread by 5G, then why do so many cities and countries yet to have 5G have the virus? Perhaps something else is spreading the virus, like, I don't know, the fact that it's a virus. People have also alleged that Bill Gates caused COVID-19 so that everyone would get vaccinations that contain tracking chips that could then be activated by 5G radio waves. To those people I say, whatever thinking cap it is you're wearing, I think it might be too tight. This is the turducken of conspiracy theories, and it can be easily disproved. If Bill Gates were really that powerful, he'd be able to get this video deleted from the internet. The only thing 5G will spread is higher quality streaming speeds, so you can enjoy whatever videos you're watching on the toilet. Yeah, that's good dancing, Bill. Ah, not now, Mike!
Thanks for that. I'm glad we got through that. It's great work by Mark, and we basically collaborated with Mark. We reached out to him. We believed he was the best satirist that we knew, and we asked him to become our chief 5G investigator. And then Mark and his writing partner Evan Williams, as well as our in-house creative team working in the comms team, created a 6-part social series. And what you saw there was the first one of that series, all about debunking the myths of 5G. So we reached 2.5 million people on social, as you'll see there, and we had really great engagement with the posts. We had thousands of reactions, comments, and shares. It was trending on Reddit as well, which was great to see. And interestingly enough, sentiment was 97% positive and supportive. We also got a lot of mainstream media coverage, both here and overseas. And I think the reason for it was that it was something different from Telstra, but probably more importantly, no one had ever tried this as a way to counter the conspiracy theorists. It was interesting, if you went into Facebook and had a look at the time where we posted, the conspiracy theorists were all in there and generating conversation, but it was the community themselves were effectively, having very strong views on the conspiracy theorists as they were in there. So they were sort of generating quite an interesting conversation and having quite a debate with each other. So it was a great platform to be able to have that conversation. And I think what it did is it allowed us to continue telling the story, going forward when the moment is right. So you can see there, there was some great positive coverage that we received. We did try one other thing. When I say we tried one other things, we did capitalise on one other thing that happened during COVID, which was interesting. When Donald Trump was tested positive for COVID, we wanted to make sure, obviously, we didn't make light of it because it's an incredibly, difficult disease and challenging disease. But we felt there was an opportunity for us to tweet something about directly to the conspiracy theorists suggesting that they shouldn't even try and blame 5G for this. Again, it was really interesting. We got a lot of interest in it, a lot of conversation. Again, the vast majority was positive. There were some people who felt it wasn't quite appropriate, but the vast majority of sentiment was positive. And I think for us, looking at the journey we came on, we felt that we're in the right place to be able to try something a little bit different and to take a risk and push the boundaries. So if I just move on to the next page, I think the other thing that has been really important for corporates, and you'll have seen right around the world, is this issue of standing up on issues that matter, and issues that matter to customers, to employees, and to to shareholders. And one of the things that's really important lesson from our perspective is that to make sure that you're always listening, constantly listening. And in the wake of what was happening in America with George Floyd and the protest across the US, we were seeing a lot of increase in social conversation locally. And there were some people who were trying to sort of stay out of it and, completely understand it. But from our perspective, really linking to our purpose and values, we believe that particularly for one post, we needed to step into the issue. And there was a guy called Alfie who featured in one of our campaigns and was the subject of racism for his work with us. And he did a video, and it was an incredibly powerful video on social media. We saw that video, and our CEO, Andy Penn, felt very strongly that he wanted to come out and support Alfie and absolutely hit back at those who engaged in the racism. Basically, somebody had written on a poster with racist remarks that's something that Alfie had been part of. So Andy was incredibly strong in his response back to Alfie, and made the point that it's pretty pathetic and cowardly, and that Alfie and lots of other people like Alfie deserve much better. So we did that, as I said, based on listening, and again the data showed that it resonated very well. We also had Andy post on the situation that was unfolding in the US. We felt quite strongly that it was important for us to support. There's a fine line, because obviously there was a lot of violence and it was a very difficult situation, but the underlying issue, we felt it was important that we needed to make the point that we do see these injustices and we can't tolerate it as society. So again, that was an important post which was well received. If we just flick through to the next one, I talked a little bit earlier about comms and marketing and commercial elements of what we do as a comms team. And what's been really interesting and powerful, particularly in social, is we've been able to use our data to show some really strong links between the comms work that we do and the commercial outcomes for the business. And there's an example here that I'll talk about in a second, but I think for us, social and what we can dig into in social allows us to tell story in multiple parts. We can be much more integrated in our planning, and then we can get under the data and understand exactly what we're seeing. So this example was where we recruited a Telstra game reviewer. So gaming has become incredibly huge. I had absolutely no idea, not a gamer myself, surprisingly. It's taken off exponentially in Australia, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but millions of people now game. It's much more families. It's not just sort of the diehard gamers, but it's families as well. So it's becoming much more of a critical thing that people love to do in their spare time, and particularly during COVID. So in this example, we recruited a Telstra game reviewer to become the face of a new series where we basically reviewed the new games that were coming out on Xbox. And the games were actually, the episodes were targeted to people who really do have an interest in gaming and Xbox. So we're able to target the campaigns specifically, and we were able to add those who engage with the episode to our engaged audience group as we went through. And then after the episodes were done, marketing were then able to come in and target that engaged audience group that we had created with direct response ads. And as a result, those in the engaged group were 18% more likely to purchase and 20% more cost efficient to reach than those who've not been exposed to this content. So that's one element. And then we're also able to do some work around when did that, how much did that actually sort of pull through into commercial outcomes, which is something that, as I said, from a comms perspective, we haven't spent a lot of time on in the past. I think that's sort of direct correlation with the commercials of the organisation, but it's something that we are working very, very strongly with marketing on. And there's numerous examples of our products where we've engaged in PR campaigns or social media campaigns where we've been able to show the benefits. And as I said, create communities that allow marketing to do their work as well. I just wanted to take a moment or two just to talk about internal communications, because we can't forget internal communications, which is the new black in my view. So if we just hop on to the next page, I probably spend a lot of my time on internal communications, much to the surprise of a lot of people, but it's such a critical part of what we do as a comms team. And we, again, create a lot of our work as a result of the data that we're seeing. And it also helps shape where we're heading, but it also allows us to see whether we've been successful. So I talked a bit about our T22 strategy in Telstra that we launched in June 2018. And we knew at that time, just given the burning platform, that we needed to rapidly help our people understand their strategy, but also understand their role in it, which is a measure that we worked very closely with HR on. And so if you have a look at the data below, so, we asked a couple of questions, and you would have heard me earlier talk about our experience pulse, which is our quarterly check-in with employees to understand how they're feeling. We put questions in from time to time just to get a sense of how they feel that they're being communicated with. And these ones show some great results. So if you see that, back in March 2019, we asked them, do you have a good understanding of Telstra's strategic direction? 75% said yes. That's now, up until June 2020 was 87%, which is an enormous jump. We also asked them, and we started asking this question in December 19, understand how your work contributes to Telstra's objectives. And as you can see there, again, an enormous jump from 84% in December 2019 to 92% in June 2020. So if we just turn to the next page, the other thing that we did during COVID, which I'm sure a lot of you also did, is that we talked to our teams about COVID and the value of our employee communications as we moved to work from home. And we were one of the first workplaces in the country to basically tip out our whole organisation, except for those who are front of house, to work from home. So we've been working from home since early March last year, and thankfully we were very used to flexible working as an organisation, so it wasn't too much of a stretch to be able to move into working from home. But part of what we wanted to do is to understand how are we keeping our people engaged, and updated. We need to understand that what is the major driver, where are they hearing their information from, which manager, and what's the most impactful. And I think what we discovered, and I'll come to this in a second, is that majority of the verbatims were incredibly positive and specifically mentioned the COVID situation by name in terms of the communication that they were receiving. And I've just, in the graph here, just showed you a bit of an upshot of some of the responses we've had through. But probably the thing that's worth just spending a couple of minutes on is the verbatims on the next page, which essentially, gave us a great understanding from a qualitative perspective how the organisation was feeling. But I'm sharing with you the positive ones here, as you probably expect me to. We also received some really constructive feedback, which was incredibly helpful, and helped shape the comms as we move through COVID. And things like, I'm enjoying the extra challenges, communication emails and updates from hierarchy help me feel connected. We've gone above and beyond to keep staff engaged, great updates, live streams, etc. So I won't read them all, but you get the sense that we got some great feedback from the team about the things that worked, and also helped us understand through that period, which we were incredibly cognizant of how do we help with mental health issues that was certainly emerging during that period of time, and I know exist today. One of the things that we did during COVID as a result of a lot of the feedback that we received is that we had daily live streams, so like daily town halls, but virtually, and we used our Yammer platform, which is also an incredibly interesting source of data, which I can come back to in a second. But we used our Yammer platform to have those live streams. Often we'd have the CEO, other times we'd have other executives, just updating the organisation on what was happening, particularly in those early stages from a COVID perspective, but importantly how we were responding, what we were doing, taking their questions. It's a very interactive platform, so we're able to have great conversations with our people, and that helps shape our comms as we move forward. We're doing those live streams once a week now, and again, that was the result of having a lot of feedback from our teams during that period of time. The final thing I'll say before I'm very happy to open to questions is that we are very much spend a lot of time in our Yammer community. The vast majority of our people are on Yammer in some form in Telstra, and the water cooler conversations that we can listen into are incredibly powerful and important for us to then use to help shape the way that we engage and connect with our people and have those really critical two-way conversations. So that's another element that we spend an enormous amount of time on from a comms perspective, to ensure that we're tapped into employee engagement and that we're responding to the things that matter to our people. So I might leave it there. I've travelled through quite a lot in that presentation. Hopefully that was of interest to you, and I am incredibly happy to engage in a conversation. So thank you, Christy.
No problem at all, Nick. I found that extremely fascinating. So thanks for taking us through the different stages of I love the 5G video, by the way. I thought that was incredible. I only wish that it was also shown in my country. We do have a question from Antonia. And Antonia, before I get to that, I did have a question that I thought we can kick things off with. And if any of our viewers who've gone through the presentation have questions of your own, please do post it in a live Q&A. And while those compile, I did want to ask, because we saw a significant difference in terms of morale, productivity, as well as just the emotional well-being of people between the first and second stages, or the first and second waves really of the pandemic. And when my own country went into a second lockdown, I think that's when I truly empathized with the Victorians, especially for having endured such a very long second lockdown, because the toll that it took, even on me personally, was quite different. Gone was that initial almost novelty of it in some cases, and that community togetherness that you initially feel. The isolation becomes a little more pervasive. Did you find a difference between the engagement with survey tools or research tools when it came, to your remote employees during this time? Are they still enjoying their live stream town halls, or did you find yourself working around any different tools to be able to continue to create that responses and keep track of what's going on?
It's such a good question. And, from a personal perspective, I always say that, as communications professionals, we, and just before I specifically answer your question, when we normally manage a crisis, we are doing it from a bit of arm's length. We're not actually experiencing the crisis at the same time. And I think that was what was so different with COVID as communicators. We were living and breathing it every day. And I suspect, like everyone, my exhaustion levels were incredibly high because of the emotional, the emotional strain on top of everything else. So I think that it was an interesting case study. No, that's not your question, it just prompted me. It's an interesting case study in terms of how to work through something like that when you're living it. But to answer your question, look, we didn't change things considerably between sort of lockdown 1 and lockdown 2. I think for me, there's probably a couple of things. We're lucky to be an incredibly productive workforce in working from home, because we, in a sense, used to it. Now, we obviously have a lot of front of house staff who have a very different perspective, because they have to be in offices and have to be going and fixing networks and things like that. So it's a different environment. But I think the vast majority of the office-based staff were used to it and comfortable. That's not to say that there weren't, there weren't different elements of groups of people experiencing different things, and there absolutely were. And what we did through COVID, and I didn't share it there, but just didn't have a great deal of time, but is that we did survey people specifically on COVID and how they were feeling and whether they were getting what they needed from an organisational perspective, from their leader perspective, but also from their communications, which I did talk a little bit about. So we did have broad questions that we were asking them very regularly on COVID. We maintained, I think for us, through both, rather than changing everything, we continued with the momentum of what we were doing, and didn't even though it was harder, we didn't sort of, slack off or stop doing our daily live streams, or, I'd send a note nightly to the executive with things that they should be talking to their teams about every day as we went into the following day. And so we did all of those things, and there was a range of others as well that, each of the leaders would do. But we continued to do those, because I think what we discovered through both of those periods is actually the tougher it got, the more we needed to communicate. And our people were lapping it up, quite frankly. So we just did more, and continued with our persistency. It was really only when we started to come out of lockdown that we, and our numbers on our live stream still showed that people were interested. They were incredibly engaged through that period of time. That's a great thing about data. You can see how many people are in and how many people go back and have a look at a live stream later, which they can do as well. But no, it was, we just kept the momentum going, to be honest with you, Christy.
Actually, that's a really nice segue, because Antonia's question was regarding social media management. And she wondered whether it was considered a comms or marketing discipline in Telstra, or whether the social media team straddles both departments. What is your layout or your structure like?
Yeah, no, thanks, Antonia. So we have, so social media sits in the comms team, and the social team is responsible for end-to-end social, and that means issues management in social, as well as PR campaigns that are comms led, and they also work very closely with marketing on marketing campaigns to ensure that what's going into the channel works, and they're often working very closely with the agency in creating the creative that actually that eventuates. We also have a customer service social media team, and they sit in our customer team, but we work very closely with them, because obviously a lot of the issues that that come through our customer service team, but it's my team's responsibility to work on them and make sure that we're responding in the appropriate way. It works incredibly well, and I know there's different variations of where social can sit. I think for me, the importance of having that end-to-end social view, the importance of comms having responsibility for the reputation side of things and how we are perceived socially end to end is really important, because marketing have just one element of it, whereas I think we have a broader view of the whole channel, and that seems to have worked well from Telstra's perspective.
And actually about how you're perceived socially, there is a question on the Black Lives Matter movement, for example. We have this from Edwina, who asks, do you think your response would have been as powerful if the message came from Telstra, the corporation, or was the message coming from Andrew as your CEO key to the strategy? Did you run any comms from Telstra's company page, around the BLM movement in parallel?
It's a great question. Absolutely, 100%. Made a greater difference because it came from our CEO. And I think I'm incredibly lucky that I have a CEO who's willing to engage in those conversations and actively wants to be part of those conversations. And it can be, there are risks associated with it, and it's such an interesting space. I didn't happen to go to the Edelman Trust conversation on Friday, but I know that they took the teams through the information. I'm just getting my head around it. But one of the things that I thought was incredibly interesting is that people expect CEOs and corporates to have views on things so much more than they ever did. And in fact, people would trust what's coming out of CEOs a lot more than other cohorts or other people. And I think that's incredibly interesting and means that there's a great responsibility on CEOs in that space. But look, to specifically answer the question, it was a very deliberate approach to have Andy as the person responding. I can't be 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure we retweeted rather through our Telstra handle. You know, my view is anything that comes from Andy comes from Telstra, so I don't sort of distinguish, and sometimes we do things just from Andy, or sometimes we'll do them just from Telstra, or vice versa. It really just depends on, you know, in a sense, whether it's a personal thing or whether it can, you know, is a more corporate thing, and it depends, or whether it's a bit more flippant, or, you know, what the approach is, and we do spend a bit of time thinking that through.
Right. I think we'll wrap up with the final question that was highly voted in the platform. And this is about, this is from Emily, who asked, in a large organization like Telstra, did you find it challenging to communicate your strategy to employees, to employ them to have a good understanding of your direction? So if we don't have time to fully answer these questions, everybody, by the way, we will get to them after the session. We'll be actually reaching out to the speakers to get those answers to you. But Nick, just shortly, did you have any challenge with this?
It's a really good question, and I think part of it is how you communicate internally, and you know, if I go back to the 5G example, it's tempting just to do some sort of, you know, very boring, here's our strategy, you know, this is what it looks like, this is why it matters, blah, blah, blah. But for us, it was very much a multi-pronged approach, which is, you know, the leader-led part of it is absolutely critical. Leaders have got to be engaged and talking to their teams about it. From a corporate context, we needed to make sure, and I'll finish on this point, we needed to make sure that we were engaging in a way that resonated with our people. And so we did use humour in terms of the way that we communicated what we would look like. I mean, we've done that just recently in terms of you know, what we're going to look like when we roll out T22, and we created a great internal campaign using a little bit of humour. And so there's different strings you can pull in terms of trying to get people engaged and understanding. It's not easy, and it takes a very long period of time to get people really with it. But I think the advantage that we had as well at Telstra is we had a burning platform to have a strategy that really turned the company around. And I think the passion of the people felt towards having something new that they could, you know, connect with made a difference as well. So, you know, it does take a lot of hard work, and it is multi-pronged, but I think I often say to my team, if you think about the treatment that you would use externally on a campaign, let's think about that internally, because our people like to be entertained as well. So how do we do it in a way that they're going to actually pay attention and really sort of connect with something, and emotionally connect, which I think is an important point.
Well, got it. Thank you so much, Nick. I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the questions answered as well. I'm definitely going to be stay tuning for that. But thank you for this wonderful session. And yeah, we'll catch you on the flip side.
My pleasure. Thanks, Christy. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And I'm happy to get back on questions. So take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care. Bye.